difference has meaning. And so it's not the people that you grew up with that live down the street from you. It's not the people that you went to Harvard with and you crewed together. It's not the people you worked in the same job with. It's not the people who are in your bowling league or your softball league. It's getting along with everybody. That's the trick of the trade in modern day workplaces. And so you know how to get along with people who are a ton like you. The world has evolved such that you got to get along with people who aren't a ton like you. And that's where these rules come to bear. So I'm going to walk through it relatively quickly. If you haven't seen my class in a few years, let me tell you what's going to be hot this time around. These 4 things that you got to know. Number 1, I don't care what you do for the city, anybody can deal with a rude, difficult, or unpleasant person who can tread into the area of discrimination and harassment. That's a common misunderstanding. But I personally believe one of the reasons why you take this class is you know where the threat lies to our employees is often from members of the public who have little or no understanding of these rules and who often have their own beef to pick with their government, which may include you, and they may overstep the bounds of reasonable behavior. Are you protected under these rules in your interactions with members of the public? I don't feel it. I don't think so. You are. This class is a pep talk. All these rules apply to you when you are at work or you are working out there within the span of our control. So are there a ton of people any given day out on the streets? Do all these civil rights laws protect you? Within our reasonable ability to control that. So keep that in mind. Next, when hostile is the new normal, it makes my job really tough. It's really hard to tell when someone has upset another person because the threshold for hostility has decreased in our society. Is that, how do I know when your critical commentary hurts somebody's feeling? How do I know when your use of profanity really offends my sensibilities? How do I know when you're just not a very nice person? I'm investigating a harassment case right now in which, get this, a manager makes female employees cry. Makes them cry. Now, here's the funny thing. I have 3 daughters. They cry all the time. Could you agree with me that if you're really sensitive and you feel like you let somebody down, might you be brought to tears? My kids do that. That's one thing. On the other side, remember back in the day, I actually worked with a guy who took great pride, notches in his belt, how many employees he made cry, male or female. How many people who could break down when he was working with them. Now I got to tell you, that person needs to come to a modern day harassment class. Because while that might have been a thing back in the day, making people cry and taking great pride in it, if you publicly humiliate another employee and you bring them to tears with profane language, aggressive behavior, publicly humiliating speech, do you think you could get fired for that? Right on, because my kids will have none of it. And they know the difference between crying because they've let somebody down and somebody publicly humiliating them. So has the world of hostility changed that you might have been able to get away with that kind of behavior? And by the way, I still see that at work. The screamer, that kind of person who likes to verbally waterboard employees. That kind of stuff, while it still happens, is thankfully moving out of many organizations. Which goes to the next one, anything goes. You know, I didn't bring my phone. I try not to carry it as much. I was gone for a number of months, and so I didn't carry a cell phone. It was awesome, liberated me. But this is a difficulty. It's hard to tell now where your work life ends and your personal life begins, right? With these cell phones, you all have them with you, I'm sure, within reach. Everybody does now. Can a supervisor reach out and touch you electronically at any given point in time, including at all hours of night? And I'll also confess, a lot of work I do a lot of people bring their personal stuff to work using cell phones? Can you engage in a personal life using electronic devices while you're at work? Do we allow you some flexibility or liberty to do that? So it's gotten really hard to tell what the appropriate boundaries at work are versus the appropriate boundaries at home are. And quite frankly, are there 2 double standards? Are there a double standard out there? Yeah. What might be acceptable at home may not be acceptable at work, and you got to know the difference. And it confuses people all the time. Which goes to that last one, and you got to know this to get out of the class. It's one of my 5 points. Your intentions are irrelevant in this area. A lot of you have been here for a long time. You know this already from previous classes. Your intentions are irrelevant. It's the greatest impediment to workplace harassment prevention is simply the lack of awareness of this. Is most people don't realize you're part of the problem, man. You have no recognition of how you land on people. But I don't intend to hurt people's feelings. Irrelevant. It's how you land on people around you, how they perceive you. Are you friend or are you foe to me that drives the bus of workplace harassment? And if you take anything out of the class, if you can recognize the difference, that the entire world of harassment is how other people perceive you, then you are a rock star. You win every time. You have good, peaceful relationships, and you will be a long-standing employee in most organizations. If you don't care very much, or you are abusing the authority you have, or you're part of the popularity cult that no longer has to recognize that it's about other people and not about you every day, then these rules get to be difficult and people quickly lose sight of them. Makes sense. I do it every day. The best of people can make bad mistakes in this area. It's not a personal attack. It's the fact that you just didn't know a rule about the world of harassment. So I tend to get this off my chest first. 3 things that impede people that come into my class, and I'm big on this. The 3 biggest reasons why people have difficulty in the world of workplace harassment is, number 1, every human being is prejudiced. Period. Every human being has their prejudices. In fact, the greatest employee that I encounter, or the most difficult employee, I should say, the greatest problem I encounter, is an employee who doesn't recognize that they have their own prejudices. They simply are unwilling to go there. This is also volatile stuff, right? So I use this example since I bring my personal life to everything I do. I personalize everything I do. So a lot of you know, I mentioned this earlier, I was deployed in the military for 9 months, got back in August, and it was a neat thing because in September, my in-laws came to visit up from Arizona to welcome me back. So I'm having this conversation with my father-in-law. I just gotten back from deployment. He's talking to me about a medical issue that happened while he was gone, and then he highlights part of his medical care, and he got bad care, in his opinion, from a healthcare professional, and he highlighted that he had difficulty getting medical care from this particular person. And so I said, oh, really? Well, you'll admit you have a prejudice then about this particular person. The minute I used the P word, you know the P word, prejudice, our conversation came to a screeching halt, and immediately the tension flag was raised in the conversation. Because he says this, I'm not prejudiced. I'm not saying you're prejudiced. I'm saying this is a prejudice that you have. But did he take it as an indictment, a personal attack that I said you harbor a prejudice? I don't mind telling you, he got medical care from a female healthcare professional. He thought she did a bad job, and he raised the specter of whether women could do this job, that he received medical care effectively. Would you agree with me that's something of a prejudice about female healthcare providers? I don't think this is a moral indictment that makes him a flawed human being. He's 79 years old, where he's received medical care from men almost his entire life. Do you think he would have a preconceived notion about what kind of medical care he should receive? This does not make him a bad person, but did that immediately raise the hackles in the back of him that thought that I was accusing him of being prejudiced against women? Does that make sense? So you can't even have a conversation with family members without them getting upset about this. So you got to know one thing. Do we all have our prejudices? I'm good with them. All the rules in this class, and the class is only an hour and 40 minutes or so, so you don't have to go crazy on it. But interestingly enough, all the rules in this class are not based on your prejudices. They're based on your outward actions, and we'll get to that in just a second. Which goes, of course, to number 2. Nobody ever sees themselves as prejudiced. You know, a lot of you know me. You know I love teaching harassment, because it always goes the same way. Some people know you're going to see me, we're going to have a good time, and this is not going to be a painful experience generally. In fact, I know I'm going to have a good time during the program. You may not. But interestingly enough, can I just confess this to you? Most people don't want to be in this class. They think that 2 hours of time or lesson is substantially more valuable. They had a lot more stuff to do. They thought they could text or tweet substantially more in their workday without coming to this class. And so many people feel that they're being deprived of 2 hours out of their life by coming to this program. That amazes me, because I started the class by telling you, all I'm going to tell you is your rights in the workplace. What are your rights? the tools by which you will equip yourself to navigate the workplace. And I've never had somebody say, well, I'd like to remain mysteriously removed or done on my own rights. Most people want to know what their rights are, correct, in our society? Is knowledge power? Yet, there are still people who walk through that door and go, I don't want to be here. Because it's a lot like church. That's why they sit in the back of the class every time. And you know why it's a lot like church? Because people walk in and go, I don't have a problem with harassment. You know who needs this class? Everybody else I work with. I'm good. You lost souls could use a little bit of work. And so much like church, it has that same implication. I'm good, but there's some people here who seriously need to see the light of the Lord. And so you get the idea. So can we get that off our chest? Can everybody learn a little something about these rules, even if you didn't think you needed to be here? Can you improve your condition a little bit better? It's like telling me you're healthy enough. Oh, really? You can't get a little bit better? Or you're pregnant enough. Or hey, how about this? You're good looking enough, right? Can you always improve the condition a little bit more in order to get a little farther along in life? Which goes to the last one. I'm a special snowflake. You know who the special snowflakes are. This class isn't about equality. Our civil rights laws demand equality, but you know why we teach these classes. Because people have developed far beyond the equal rights protections of our Constitution. At work, you realize this. People don't want to just be treated equally. You all know you're entitled to be treated equally, right? You already know the law of the land? Are you generally entitled to be treated equally? That's not why people come to these classes. Why people come to these classes is they know they're a special snowflake. A lot of you are from Colorado. What is it about snowflakes? They're all unique. There's no two snowflakes alike. So here's what you need to know, get out of the class. I know I talk quickly through this. Everybody is a special snowflake. People just don't want to be treated equally. They want to be appreciated for what they bring to the table, for the unique gifts, for why they're special. I'll use an example of this. I'm lying, just so you know, but I'm going to make the class go faster by acting. So pretend I'm this employee. I'm Chuck. I'm from Nebraska. We work hard, and we can lift heavy farm animals over our heads. I'm not from Nebraska. It's just a stereotype I have about Nebraskans. If you're from Nebraska, just roll with me on this. I appreciate your great strength in lifting farm animals. I'm not trying to insult you in any way. That said, if somebody wants to be treated specially and appreciated for their gifts, could you go a long way by acknowledging them for their special gift? Wow, you really can work hard, and who would have thought you could lift that farm animal so far over your head? Would that be a little bit more glue in the relationship if you can identify what's special about the people you work with and maybe acknowledge it? And I'll be honest with you, what I do is not rocket science. If you can appreciate the differences, the unique gifts of the people around you, or quite frankly, the people in your own family, I can be a little bit closer to them. Probably so. And if you can do it, you're good. If you can't, you're probably going to potentially have more difficulties than others. So let's go through this pretty quickly. Stereotypes, everybody does them. You know that. John was in the military. This is a common one. I just came back from a deployment. John was in the military, so what's a common stereotype? He can fold his underwear neatly. What's another one? PTSD. He's going to go all Rambo on us. Is that another common stereotype? Yes. So you get the idea. Do we immediately engineer stereotypes from relatively infrequent encounters? Does every human being do this? I could put anything up there. I'm watching the political campaign season go on. If I said, Donald is rich and from New York, what might be a stereotype associated with him? Says provocative things. How about that? Aggressor behavior. Might people get an immediate stereotype about their few interactions with others? Do we all do this every day? Quite frankly, there's nothing wrong with it. That's not this class. The next issue is these prejudices can be positive or negative. Please don't fall into the trap here. Our prejudices can be positive about groups or they can be negative. For example, have you ever heard the stereotype, Asian persons are hard workers? Have you ever heard this? Asian persons are hard workers. This stereotype is a common stereotype. I encounter it with some frequency. It's interesting to me on many respects. But do you think that stereotype don't get me wrong, is it a good thing to be a hard worker? Yeah, I mean, I'm an American. I'll be honest with you. Americans pride themselves on work ethic. We had these Puritans that came to this country. I was not one of them. I'm an immigrant. But these Puritans that were here originally, they were hard workers. That's part of the American ethos, to be a hard worker. You know how I can prove it to you? Do this test. Go to anybody you know and ask them, do you think you're a hard worker? Guess what the answer you're going to get 99% of the time is? Even if they're the laziest dog in the world, guess what they're going to say? I'm really a hard worker. Because they know part of the American ethos is we're pretty hard-working folk. And if you want to mainstream with others, are you going to often say you're a hard worker? Even if you're not very hard-working, even if you don't care much about work, correct? So, being a hard worker is a common positive stereotype. How can that possibly work harm against anybody who goes to work every day? How could that possibly hurt you? Very good. One is, it really drives a wedge between you and your coworkers, because might they create the appearance that you're getting privileged status, you're getting a more positive treatment or stereotype than others. So we non-Asians, can we potentially think that you're the favored son or daughter of our organization? Especially if you say that stereotype how? Publicly. Might that drive a wedge between others? I'll also tell you the other difficulty of this stereotype is this set people up for unrealistic expectations. If you assume that you're going to be a hard worker because you're Asian and you're not exactly the hardest worker in the world, might you fail much more miserably because you don't meet a stereotype? Remember, when you put people on a pedestal, they have farther to fall when you push them off of it, correct? So keep in mind, you got to know this to get out of the room. Can even positive stereotypes have just as much detriment as negative stereotypes in organizations? Which goes to the bottom one. It's not your stereotypes or prejudices that drive this class. It's only overt decision making. You'll notice there, it says, I won't hire a woman to do this job. Is that going to be illegal? Yeah, I got to tell you, I mean, I want to make sure you understand this. I'm not trying to be insulting, but I do talk quickly because your time is incredibly valuable to me, and I think these learning points are not complex. There are people who live in this world, who live in the United States, who go to work every day, who have this fundamental prejudice. They believe a woman's place is in the home and not in the workplace. Have you ever met somebody like this? Have you met somebody like this? Yes, that's a common, not common, but that's a stereotype. I find it fascinating as a married person to a working woman and the father of 3 daughters who knows something about the demographics of our nation, where women approximately equal men. Women are approximately half of the labor force. And if you haven't gotten the memo, women are kicking rear end when it comes to attainments in their careers. Who's more likely to graduate from college? 60% of college graduates are women. Who's more likely to graduate from graduate school, from professional school? Most law school and med school graduates today happen to be female. Most graduate school attainments happen to be female. In fact, there's an open question about men, if they're left unattended, will they stop attending college? Because women are pummeling them in academic attainments. So ironically, are women measures, by all measures, of success in many ways? They are. So for someone to say a woman's place isn't at work and is in the home, I would say is an archaic opinion. It is probably a person out of time, literally, because it's unrealistic. That said, can that person have that opinion? Yes, that's what makes this country awesome, is not everyone thinks as crazily as I do. There's level-headed, sane people in it. And so it's okay for people to disagree. Why are you in this class? If you actually were a person with that prejudice and you hired people and you refused to hire a woman, would that be against the law? Yeah, clearly where prejudice works to overt action, it becomes illegal. So, you got that down? Okay, let's see how well you do. These stereotypes really distort our perception. They put us in the mood that we're in. You know, I'll give a simple example of our stereotypes. I use me as the example. I never want to offend any of you because it can be difficult for people to hear these stereotypes. So I'm one of those people who I couldn't wait to get out of high school. I went to Columbine High School. It was an awesome high school. I was heavily involved. But I just thought high school wasn't for me. I just thought I was just too restricted. I just wanted to be out of that whole thing, and I wanted to move out of my house, and I just was ready to be an adult. Some people were like that. I don't know if it might have been you. I just was not that into high school. I just didn't think that would be the relationships that would sustain me the rest of my life. Ironically, my life when I went to high school. So I can't escape it. But interestingly enough, I just had my high school reunion when I got back from deployment. And as much as I couldn't wait to get out of high school, now if you mention Columbine High School, it raises incredibly positive feeling with me. That over the span of 3 decades, my prejudice, my stereotype has changed entirely. And so now, if you say you went to Columbine, it immediately is a bonding experience, rebels for life. Whereas back in the day, I did not have the same favorable view of the institution as I do now. So can our prejudices affect our mood about who we want to hang with, how we see the world, and the lens by which we decipher information? Make sense? Everyone does this, by the way. Which also goes to, I think it really sets up people for expectations about what they expect of other people. We're going to talk about that. In fact, let's see how well you do with this. I put you into a quiz, and you got to be able to navigate these quiz questions to get out of the class successfully. There's not that many of them this time around, because I changed the class a bit. But let's see how well you do. Supervisor refused to let a new female employee travel out of town for work because the supervisor was worried it wouldn't look right for her to travel out of town overnight with older married male employees. Is that legal or illegal? That's illegal. Thank you. I want to make... When you throw down like that, it makes class go quickly. And at the end of the class, people revere you, just so you know. And so they're going to, thank you so much. Thank you. They'll carry you out of here on their shoulders by the end of this. So it's illegal, right? So that's actually was an easy question. This person was wearing their prejudice on their sleeve, and they made a decision to keep the woman from doing her job. So here's the harder question and why you're in this class, because I want to make you really smart in a very short amount of time. What prejudice is coming to bear here? What's that? Yeah, did you hear the comment? Thank you. You get that's half credit. The prejudice that I'm hearing is the concern that she's weak or vulnerable, that these older married men, when they're traveling together, left to their own devices, once they pass outside the jurisdiction of their marriage, will prey on this young, attractive woman. And therefore, she can't take care of herself. Thank you. Now, I got to tell you, there's another prejudice working here, which is what? All men are, yeah, we poor marriage schlubs. Golly, we're pretty easily distracted.
There could be some good intention that the supervisor doesn't want the female to create a bad reputation.
Yeah, this is going to the dark side here. Is she's not so weak and vulnerable that left to her own devices, can I go all biblical on you? That she'd be something of a harlot. She'd be a Jezebel. She would lure these innocent married men away from their marital contract because she would prey on them like a siren calling across the night, that she would lure these poor men away from their spouses. So could it go both ways? That maybe she's vulnerable, or could she be the one who's the aggressor? Either way, these are not very, going to your point, these are not very positive stereotypes. Not against her, and quite frankly, not about the married men either, right? But you realize, I'm going to make sure you get this. Those are stereotypes, right? Her job requires her to do what? Travel. So what's the legal thing to do? Get in your vehicle or get on an airplane and travel. And if you need to say no shenanigans, then that might be a different matter. But is she expected to do the same job that they're expected to do if they're doing the exact same work? Does that make sense? Very good. If you know that, you know a lot. Any questions on that? You got to know stereotypes that drive decisions are the problem. Which goes to the next one. Morgana asked for the day off on October 31st to attend the Samhain Sabbat. This is the New Year's observance of Wicca. And you know this is going to be a problem because the supervisor wrote in a memo his objection, which is as follows. Wicca is not a real religion, but an illogical conglomeration of various aspects of the occult, such as faith healing, self-hypnosis, tarot card reading, and spell casting, which are not religious practices. Who wins this debate? Morgana wins. I'm going to make sure you get this. All of our civil rights laws demand equality. You can't rely on a prejudice or stereotype to keep people from doing their job. There is one exception that you have to be aware of, and I'm moving quickly. We always have a duty to accommodate someone's religious beliefs and practices, and we always have a duty to accommodate someone's disabling condition. Correct? So we have to consider accommodations of your religion and of a disability. For everything else, we can treat you equally. In this case, is being in a Wiccan a protected religion? You'll see in a moment the answer is yes. So if it's a protected religion, do we have to consider accommodating it? We do. Just so you're aware. We'll come back to that in just a second. Okay, you good? Got to accommodate religion and disability. So let's go through it. I'm going to talk quickly. A lot of you know me already, and you've been in this class before, but there's some new employees. So I'm going to put some pressure on the new employees. If I say anything that inspires a question, please slow me down. Or since we last got together, if you have any amplifying questions, I encourage you to slow me down. So this is a time when it's okay to ask a question, because I assure you it'll make class go faster. It sounds counterintuitive, but you're probably touching on an issue that we're going to address in this class. Might as well knock them down like dominoes and make class move that much more quickly. So let me go through these protections relatively quickly. That's the litany of protections under federal law. Please make sure you get this. It's in the handout I gave you. But interestingly enough, these things can rarely, if ever, be held against you in the workplace. That's what you need to know. The law demands equality. You can't hold these things generally against our employees. So let's run through them relatively rapidly. This is the simple memory aid that I use to remember the protected categories: race, ethnicity, gender, age, religion, and disability are the principal federal protections. And so remember the Teddy Roosevelt quote, "Get along with people"? I change it to regard other people. So if you can regard people, you can remember the acronym: race, ethnicity, gender, age, religion, and disability. Those things can't be held against you generally. Remember, for religion and disability, you have to do what? Accommodate. Got those down? Those are critical principles. You got to know your rights. You know why I say that? You know what has energized, first being on deployment energized me because I'm in super good shape now. But you know what happened to me? So I get back from deployment and I'm reconnecting with all my clients. And one of my clients I've had as a long-standing time says this to me: "Chuck, I'm so glad you're back. While you were gone for 9 months, we were taking this employee through performance management. We were telling her she wasn't doing her job. We were disciplining her. We were giving her performance improvement plans. And ultimately, about 3 weeks before you got back, I had to terminate her employment because she wasn't doing her job very effectively." Get this. No sooner, in the same meeting that the supervisor had let her go, "You're not meeting my expectations," she looks up at him and she says this: "I wonder if the stroke I had a year ago was impacting my performance." Excuse me? Now, here's a question for you. It's why I teach this class now. It almost makes me have a religious fervor about it. You probably know this already. If she never said a word about her underlying physical or mental condition at any time before they made the decision to fire her, what are her rights? She didn't have any. This is a sad reality of why you're in this class. If she never said a thing about having had a stroke, and they did all that discipline of her and finally fired her, and they had no knowledge of a physical or mental condition, what are her rights? None. Now, they're trying to help her, which I really like about this company. They're trying to say, "Whoa, wait a minute, we didn't realize you had a medical problem. Let's go back and revisit this." But do they have to do that? They're doing it out of compassion, not because of a legal requirement. So I made this promise. There is no way I'm going to show up in front of a group of employees from now into the future that they don't have a firm understanding of their rights. Because if she had said this, at any point in the process, "You know, I had a medical problem that's affecting my work, or I think might be affecting my work," would that have changed the entire spectrum of rights that she would have had coming to her? Are there people that work for Commerce City who are in physically demanding jobs that tomorrow could be physically or mentally afflicted while they're working? You need to know, unlike her, what your rights are. Because now I've made a commitment that I will not let somebody get fired without having an understanding of those rights. Make sense? So please, it's serious, real deal. People who don't know their rights, can they be negatively affected? So I want you to know that a lot more than others. Sir?
What determines a religion or creed?
We're going to talk about that. In fact, I'm going to give you the definition in just a second. In fact, I'll give you the definition right now because I promised you I'd make class go faster. Let me give the federal government's definition of religion. It's, by the way, I love this question. It's my favorite question. So it's almost like I planted you. Don't say I did. But here's the government's definition of religion. You ready? It's a 3-part test. It's any set of sincerely held. So you have to have sincerity of beliefs. This rules out some people automatically because they're not sincere. You know who they are. So it's any set of sincerely held moral or ethical beliefs as to what is right or wrong. Second part. Third part, which are as strongly held as traditional religious views. So, sincerity, moral or ethical, as strongly held as a traditional religion. So you believe it like a true believer of the traditional faiths. Or are all the traditional faiths automatically protected? Yes. So, you need to know, can religion be non-traditional belief systems? Of course, Wiccans, pagans, Worldwide Church of God, Pentecostal holiness, Worldwide Church of God, I mentioned that. Atheism, agnosticism. Tom Cruise, the world's most famous Scientologist, a protected religion under civil rights laws. So it's a very broad definition. A Jedi Knight. Don't think about it. It's been litigated. Heck yeah. If you really believed in the underlying principles of Jedi Knight, that the Force truly does emanate through the universe, then you're probably well settled to be protected in the workplace if you ascribe to the principles of Jedi Knight-dom. So you get the idea. Can it be almost anything? How many people have to be in your religion for it to be a religion? One. So could you, sitting on a bar stool on a Friday night, conceive of your own religious faith that we have a duty to protect and accommodate? Yes, I challenge you this weekend to come up with these things, but you get the idea. So it's a very broad definition. And if it's a religion, what do we have to do? Reasonably accommodate. Thank you. You guys are good. This class is going to go quickly. So let's run through these pretty fast. John has very strong opinions against homosexuality. He's not aware that any of his coworkers are gay, but at work he constantly condemns homosexual conduct, the gay agenda, and refers to coworkers who disagree with his opinions by a variety of offensive names based on sexual orientation. One employee complains, can John's behavior be unlawful harassment? Everyone knows this, right? Yeah, in Colorado, the answer is absolutely yes. Colorado protects not only all those federal things that you just saw, but a few additional, and they include sexual orientation, heterosexuality, homosexuality, bisexuality, all protected in Colorado. Ridiculing an employee based on their sexual orientation is against the law. Age-old forms of locker room humor, queer, fag, homo, dyke, are those illegal if they're unwelcome in the workplace? Automatically, we're seeking to eradicate that behavior from work because in Colorado it's heavily regulated. Colorado's got a unique perspective because it does include gender identity. This is the more difficult legal concept to get your brain around, is that someone has the right to alter their gender identity or appearance during the course of their work life in Colorado. So are you protected if you're transgender? Yes, this has reached recent level of public attention because of television programs like Transgender, which won a number of awards in these television award season, or the experience of former Olympic athlete Bruce Jenner, who altered his gender identity to female and is now known as Caitlyn Jenner. So are these issues that the public has some awareness of and have raised public consciousness to this issue? All protected in Colorado. Questions on that? Okay, that's not too hard. All right, let's keep going. Race. Can I run through these rapidly? You promised you'd slow me down, right? So race is every race. Race is an undefined term in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and I'll tell you why, because they didn't want to exclude any race. Because if you put a definition on something, can you exclude people in a definition? It narrows the meaning of terms. So race is an all-encompassing term. It's every race. Whether you're white, black, Native American, Asian, you identify as being of mixed or many race, every race is protected. Harassment based on stereotypes, profane language based on race, all protected from, all prohibited, under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Couple tidbits here that you need to know. Please don't play the race game. Can anyone identify with whatever race they choose to identify with? Yes, race is part of a social convention. You're allowed to adopt the race by which you feel most affinity or comfort for. So you can't say, how much race do you have in you? It's your own decision of whatever race you want to have in you and with whom you identify most frequently. Which goes to the second point about race. Please remember, you have associational protection based on race and all these protected categories. So if you're married to someone of a different race, can that fact be held against you? Certainly not. If you belong to a racial group, care, NAACP? Are you protected based on your membership in those groups? And of course, if you associate with persons in your family who are of different races, are you protected by virtue of that? This also does include having a disabled child. If you, I get this question more frequently. It's not a racial protection, it's a disability protection. Are you protected if you have a disabled child? Yeah, so can you ask for accommodation at work if you need to care for a disabled child? Yeah, your relationships are just as protected as your own identity under these rules. Questions about that? That's an evolving concept in this area. All right, let's keep going. National origin or ancestry. You guys are going to figure out the theme to this. Are you all protected based on your race? Yes. If a person who's white, like myself, claims to be a victim of racial discrimination, is that against the law? Yes, if my race is, if a white person is discriminated against, is that against the law? Yeah, we often use the term of art, reverse discrimination, still actionable under these rules. It's not the most common claim, to be honest with you. The vast majority of racial discrimination claims are not brought by persons who are white, but by persons who are distinct minorities in this country. But national origin is also all of you. It's where your people come from, your ethnicity, your heritage, your ancestry. Everyone is ostensibly protected because everyone in this country has ancestors that came to America from another place. So I happen to be Italian American. I'm still one of those Americans that hyphenates my ethnicity. I'm proud of it. I would not be the person I am without the fact of my family's experience in this country. So I wear it with a measure of pride. Some people chafe at that we should all be Americans without the hyphens. Not me. I think a lot of Americans come here from other places and still come here from other places and pride America on a place to go to. So that's protected, correct, from any discrimination, any stereotype based on your national origin. So mocking someone's accent is a common example of this. Mocking the fact that their name is different are all these forms of protection. Can they be a problem? How do you say your name? What is it? Is that a foreign last name? Or I had a case, I love what I do. I had a case in which a woman had I will just say, this is my own opinion, a beautiful last name. And her co-worker used to go up to her and say, "Your name is so ethnic." I love that. And I add the accent because it's funny to me. "Your name is so ethnic," which for those of us with an ethnic last name, which is, I would say, the vast majority of Americans, unless they came over in the Mayflower, is just funny to me. And here's what's funny about it to me. That actually offended the coworker. That seemed like exclusionary behavior, that you're making fun of where my people come from. And in fact, she really meant it as a compliment. But if you really thought someone's name is beautiful, what would you say? "Wow, your name is beautiful." That probably rarely offends somebody as opposed to, "You're so ethnic," which means you're pretty different, aren't you? And can people take it the wrong way? Does that make sense? So I'll tell you how not to get fired. Never say, "What kind of name is that?" Or, my other favorite one, I think if you don't use this expression, "You people," if you could navigate your entire career without using the expression "you people," you will work longer than anyone else in America. Because immediately when you punctuate "you people" with any other statement, are you going to go down the discrimination bus? You are. You're just getting right on it. So if you avoid the comment, "You people are prideful. You people don't listen," are you going to cause a problem and raise the specter of discrimination? So I would say, how about this? "You don't listen" might be an appropriate commentary to make to somebody as opposed to making it about their people and where they're from. Does that make sense? Been on the receiving end, and you know what I'm talking about in this regard. Let's keep going. Any questions on that? It gets even better. Gender. This is, of course, easy. Gender is defined as your biological gender assigned to you at birth. That's a lot, isn't it? Your biological gender assigned to you at birth. Primarily, whether you're male or female, is the extent of federal protection. Now, the federal government is changing their perspective on this, and they believe encompassed within your gender are a number of features, including the fact that men and women have to be paid the same, including the fact that only women become pregnant. Therefore, pregnancy is a protected feature of working. And then finally, lately, the federal government believes your gender does encompass to some degree your sexual orientation. So please keep in mind, gender is an incredibly broad concept. And stereotypes or prejudice about gender can get people sideways with these rules relatively quickly. And that includes the fact that people don't conform to your perception of how the ideal man or woman should look. I can't tell you the number of cases I get in which a man is ridiculed because he appears to be effeminate, or a woman is ridiculed because she appears to be masculine in her attributes or personal appearance. Are those getting into gender discriminatory problems? So the key is not to make gender the issue about any person with whom you work, and you'll probably survive work today. Which goes to genetic information. I don't talk anything really about this. Your family health history can't be held against you. Actually, I recognize a ton of people. You might remember when I did this class a few years ago, I used this example. My mom's a breast cancer survivor. Why would a dark-hearted employer or health insurance company hold it against my kids upon discovery that my mom had breast cancer? Yeah, because of the genetic concern that it might pass to my kids. Might they get ill with cancer, be very costly on health insurance? Might my kids miss a lot of time because they might get breast cancer as well? Is that against the law to hold my mom's health history against my family members? It is. You can't do that anymore, just so you know. Not that we make a lot of questions or inquiries. So tell me about how your family health history. Can we have a beer and talk about that? That you know not to go there, correct? Which goes to age. At what age are you protected? 40, thank you. This is the only thing that surprises people who are new to my class. It's the only stuff that when I get new people, new employees, people who are just out of their educational experience and they come to work, they go, excuse me? I'm going to put you in this scenario. If I refuse to select for promotion a well-qualified 29-year-old employee because I think she is simply too immature for the additional responsibilities of this leadership position, even though she may be the best qualified candidate on paper, is that against the law? No. What? No. Because is it lawful to hold someone's age against them if they're under age 40? It is. I'm not encouraging this, by the way. But you have to be 40 years old to be protected from age discrimination. Please remember that. I'm not encouraging age discrimination, but there is a threshold here that not everybody reaches. You got to be 40 to be protected from age discrimination. Now, can I look the other side of this? Could I mandate that a City of Commerce City employee retire at age 65? And please can't answer this question. No. You can't require someone to retire at age 65 because that's a form of what? Does anybody know the exception to this rule? Airline pilots and air traffic controllers and public safety personnel, which includes police and fire. They can be mandated to retire at a certain age, but not any other public sector employee generally. Questions? Okay, you guys feel good? You guys know these things, right? Let's keep going. We're going fast. All right. Religion, thanks to your excellent question, I told you to make class go faster. So did everybody get the definition earlier? Is religion broadly defined? Can almost any belief system really encompass religious beliefs? So you got to know that. That's why having religious discussions in the workplace are invariably problematic, because they strike at the heart of these rules. Are you going to meet people of different religious beliefs and convictions in the workplace? And here's only what you need to know. Number one, do we have to accommodate religious beliefs or practices? Yes. Number two, up to what point? Undue hardship on the operation of the City of Commerce City. It's not an automatic requirement to accommodate you, only up to undue hardship. For example, when I gave the Morgana example, she wanted October 31st off, which is Halloween night. Is that a pretty busy day, especially in law enforcement? A lot of people out in the streets, a lot of stuff going on that day. If she was a cop, could we have said, well, everybody's working tonight and nobody has taken off? Would that be perhaps a reasonable basis for saying that she couldn't take that day off? Probably so. Makes sense? And what's the third rule? Remember, if you're not very religious, do you have the right to be left alone? You do. Is active religious proselytizing can be religious harassment. So do people have a right to be left alone? At work? How you worship and believe in your own life is certainly protected as well, correct? But do you have a right to be left alone from other people's religious intrusion into your life, especially at work? Make sense? Now, I also want to tell you, since I saw you last, I get these cases a lot. Passive expressions of faith are often not harassing anyone. I had this happen. Again, I think it's this lack of knowledge that causes these complaints. I had this happen where an employee complained that every day in the break room during lunch, her coworker would sit in silent prayer before consuming his midday meal. So everybody's in the break room. Coworker does this over saying grace over his midday meal. And she complained that she felt as though she was being religiously harassed by being proximate to his prayer. What do you think about that? She's full of it. Thank you for the correct legal assumption. That's a misunderstanding of these rules. The law demands equality, right? If during my lunch period I get to watch ESPN Sports Center, which quite frankly I do with religious devotion, do my coworkers have their own free time during their meal period to do what they do during their meal period? In this case, sit in silent prayer. Would that be acceptable? Would that be equal treatment? And of course, I'm not overstepping your right to do your own thing during lunch. Now, if the person breaks out in prayer, everybody join me! Might that be a different matter, and would that start to take on the turn of preaching your faith? So you got the difference, right? Okay. Make sense? Questions? I want you to know these rules better than anyone else who goes to work. Which goes to, if an employee divulges she's an alcoholic and often drinks heavily on the weekends, the employer must permit her to come in late on Mondays to accommodate her disability. Yeah, I'm looking for a ton of laughter on this. You know this is absurd, right? And now you know this stuff now. This employee is not asking for equal treatment. What is she asking for? Special treatment. And our civil rights laws give you what? Equal treatment, not preferential treatment. If everyone else is expected to meet attendance requirements, is she expected to meet the same attendance requirements? Now, I know you know this stuff. What do you make of the word alcoholic up there? What if she's an alcoholic? Could that be a disabling condition? It could be. According to the federal government, severe alcoholism can be a disease which can have profound impact on a major life activity, and therefore could being an alcoholic be a disability. So what are the rules around that? I wanted you to know it. Number one, if you have a disability, do we have to accommodate it? Thanks to your excellent question earlier, if you thought religion was defined broadly, buckle your seatbelt. Disability may be defined even more broadly. For example, can mental impairments constitute disabling conditions? Can depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, can those be disabling conditions? Can physical impairments that affect your back, your lifting ability, your ability to concentrate, sleep, can they be disabling conditions? All of which we have to consider accommodating. Up to what point? Undue hardship in the operation of this city. Couple things about that. We never have to take away the essential functions of your job as an accommodation. If you have to do some aspect of your job, are you still expected to do that function of your job with an accommodation? Exactly. Questions on that? So you all know this stuff. If someone truly is disabled and they're an alcoholic, what would be the reasonable accommodation? Get them treatment. Unlike the last class here where someone said, we'd have to have a bar. No, it's get them treatment.
So in the example that you gave, when she makes the claim that she is an alcoholic and needs special accommodation, would that be considered that she's implying that she's somehow disabled, and so changing the direction and saying, well, we need to get, based on what we talked about this morning, we need to get an assessment?
Yeah, the minute somebody says they physically, the minute somebody says they either physically or mentally can't do their job, or they unveil they have a physical or mental problem, which would give you a suspicion that they can't do their job, the answer is the same every time at the City of Commerce City. We tell that person to see their medical care provider with a copy of their job description, and we ask for an assessment of what limitations, if any, they have in doing their job. It happens every time. We do it uniformly as an organization, and we don't pry into the physical or mental condition. All we want to know is what? How does it impact your job? And that's critical, just so you know. In fact, it'd be insulting to pry into the severity or prognosis. So how many drinks do you have any day? Really? That's not so bad. I don't think you're an alcoholic. We don't pry into the condition. We pry into whether someone's physically or mentally capable of doing their job. That's how Commerce City aspires to do it in every instance. Make sense? And we can ask. That's why I want to make that clear. We can ask. Which goes to harassment versus discrimination. You guys good? Do you feel good? Okay, here's the moment of truth. Right now I often take, we're in the last half of our class. Right now I often take 5 minutes to give people a chance to reset their bearings, get a drink of water, go to the restroom, do whatever they feel they need to do. Or I dispense with the break and let the class end early. I'm going to look at you and I'm going to get a sense that you'd rather make the class keep on going. I appreciate that. Hey, squeaky wheel gets the grease, just so you know in my world. So thank you. Here's the rule that I have about that. I'm not offended by people walking out of this room to take a break, going back to get a drink of water, or doing what you need to do during the remaining less than 1 hour of the program. Do you feel like you could do that among friends and get up and walk out of the room or move through the room as you need to? Is that cool? Good. You're going to appreciate that for your decisiveness. So let's go through it pretty quickly. The rest of the class is how do we protect us and the people around us? So I thought I'd give you 5 rules to address this, make it very clear to you, and most importantly, what are Commerce City's expectations about employees in this regard? And that's the remainder of our class. So please, same rules apply. No such thing as a bad question. I want to make sure that people can get along well. So you got to know for the rest of the class, there is a huge difference between working in a difficult work environment and someone who's discriminating against you. This is critical. This is where I lose people in the class. There are some people, given the sensitivities that there are in the world right now, there are some people who are easily offended. They think everything is harassment. What did you say? What? Well, that's harassment. Nothing could be further from the truth. Why is a lawyer even teaching the class? To make sure you understand this is a legally defined term, workplace harassment. And you have to meet the threshold test of harassment. Having a bad day isn't necessarily harassment. Having someone treat you unequally in an offensive manner may be. And you got to be able to separate these two concepts. Can you complain about both? Someone who's mean to you and someone who's harassing you? Certainly, but there may be a big difference between the two. So let me run through this. You got to be able to know these 3 questions, and I would encourage you to write them down because they're not in the handout that I gave you. But if you ever need to know this, it's going to be helpful to you. Number 1, all harassment is discrimination. All discrimination is treating people differently. So in order for you to be a victim of unlawful harassment, the burden is on you to demonstrate you're being treated differently. So I'm going to make class go quickly. You're going to see a problem in less than a half hour, which goes something like this. It's the most common workplace harassment complaint I entertain. Chuck, I work with a jerk. A rude, difficult, unpleasant human being who makes my life and the life of everyone I work with miserable. I'm being harassed. Under this first question, what is going to be the principal impediment to this person bringing a successful harassment claim? You're not being treated differently. You don't work with a harasser because there's no evidence of differential treatment. Instead, I have to tell that person, you're not being harassed. Instead, you work with the spawn of Satan, which is bad, but it's not against the law. Should you still complain about working with a difficult person? Yes. Can we still tell the spawn of Satan they need to straighten up or get out? Yes. But have you been harassed unlawfully? Probably not. Does that make sense? So thank you. Next one. We treat people differently all the time. You got to know this. Do we pay longer-term employees more money? Yeah, it's awesome. Longer-term employees are like, you're right on. Is we treat people differently all the time based on reasonable bases. To have a harassment claim, you have to bring one of the regard categories up. You got to show you're being treated differently based on your race, your ethnicity, your gender, age, religion, disability, sexual orientation. Now, I want to tell you, I never tell you this in class, how do people prove these cases? Courts allow direct evidence, circumstantial evidence, or statistics to prove discrimination. Direct, circumstantial, statistics. So how does that work? What's direct evidence? Direct evidence is smoking gun information. I would never let a woman work here. Women, shoot! Is that a problem? Yeah, that's direct evidence of discrimination. Often offensive language supports that. What's circumstantial evidence? Circumstantial evidence is that the circumstances of the cases create the impression that maybe discrimination occurs, that we have never had someone who's black or Hispanic working in this job, and the person who is the decision maker is not black or Hispanic. Might the circumstances suggest that perhaps they might be impeding the ability of blacks or Hispanic workers to work there, especially if you sprinkle it with what? Some circumstantial evidence that perhaps they have bias. They've said to somebody who they work with, well, I really feel uncomfortable working with people who are black. Well, really? And you're a decision maker about people to hire in the organization? Might that create the impression that circumstances are keeping persons of color from this organization? What is statistical evidence? Often proved in age discrimination. We have a layoff of 30 people. All 30 people who are laid off happen to be over 40 years of age. Is there circumstantial evidence there? Wow, everybody got laid off is over 40. Let me put on my thinking cap. But what are the statistics? If everyone who kept their job was under age 40, might that create the impression that there is an age disparity in the organization? As opposed to, if the 30 people who got laid off, actually their average age was much less than the average age of the organization, might that create a different impression? No, we've kept a lot of our more senior people, and the statistics suggest that. Does that follow? So you can prove discrimination in a variety of different ways to get to the bottom of this. And then finally, of course, you have to establish that the underlying, to be harassment, it has to be severe or frequent. Please keep that in mind. Having one bad day rarely constitutes harassment. Can a Commerce City employee, though, complain? This is why you're in the class. You don't have to wait to be harassed before you have the right to bring a claim. In fact, I encourage people to nip this problem in the bud early. You know, I wasn't kidding about that case I'm investigating. If we discover that a supervisor is making employees cry, I don't care if it's harassment or not. What am I going to tell that supervisor? You make another person cry, I'm going to fire you. Does that make sense? Well, shouldn't you be able to make people cry? No. It's humiliating, and you can't do it. Really? Yes, really. Work has changed. We've come out of the mines, and we're actually on earth now, working above ground, is that the expectations of work have changed immeasurably, just so you know. Which goes to these things. I thought I'd throw these out there for public consumption. Things the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is always looking for is touching people potentially against the law. You know this answer. Yeah, the closer the proximity of contact, the more intimate the area of contact, the more likely it is to be workplace harassment. So mostly, for those personal space invaders in the room, you know who you are? Touchy, grabby, feely types. I include myself among you, by the way. You're in good company. Do you have to be doubly attentive to this concern? You can't touch people in an unwelcome manner. Does that mean you can hug people? Yes, as long as what? They want to be hugged. Excellent. It's not difficult what we do. And so where does it become a problem? You can't do it without someone's clear welcomeness. So should you ask people if you can hug them? No, that's creepy. Don't do that. Hey, can I hug you after class? Okay. I think it's weird. I think it actually begs for even more questions. I would recommend you not hug unless it's very clear it's a welcome exchange between two people. And you generally know that when you experience it. Oh, hey, thanks, Linda. I forgot to do that, so I appreciate it. Hey, Linda's passing out. That's my bad. She's passing out our acknowledgement that you attended class. And so would you please acknowledge you attended class and that you understand that we have these guidelines here. I forget to hand those out, so thank you for doing that. You never give up your right to be free from harassment. You know that, right? Even if you work in an environment in which you're entirely outnumbered, are you still protected from workplace harassment? You know how the people ask me that at work? Is they call it, I call it assumption of risk. Well, Chuck, in our department is a little bit of rough language. I need you to know that. So people might be hearing some things they might find pretty difficult to hear. Oh, really? It's fantastic. Are you still protected from workplace harassment? Yes. Now, I do admire trying to educate your workforce about how work is, I'm not trying to be disparaging. I've had a long experience with law enforcement agencies. Sometimes it's a very difficult job and people adopt something of a gallows humor. Are you familiar with this concept? What's a gallows humor? It's dark. You can make fun of things that maybe in public conversation you wouldn't make fun of. Is that often part of that culture? Maybe so. If I knew that going into it, might I be willing to accept some of that dark type of humor in that job? So I think it's okay to educate people about that. It doesn't make it harassment as long as it's what? A welcome experience. So it depends on what job you have, right? About what the accepted norms are in the job. And that's okay. Has to be unwelcome. Which goes to, of course, you're protecting people in your same group. Is it conceivable that, I always forget. I haven't seen you in a while. So I had this happen when I got back. It was actually embarrassing. So interestingly enough, female employee, her gender is irrelevant. Employee complains that another employee is making insensitive remarks about disabled people in the workplace, about people who are disabled, in particular people with developmental disabilities. So she complains coworker is making offensive remarks about disabled people. So I take a look at this case, and get this, the person who is making the insensitive remarks about disabled people happens to be the only employee in this entire organization who is a paraplegic, living his life in a wheelchair. So he's disabled, and he's accused of what? Making fun of disabled persons. Now, think about it for a second here in context. Might this be a form of dealing with your own disabling condition to mock it or make fun of this as a coping mechanism for your situation? Do you think you could do that? Kind of make fun of your own life experience as a coping mechanism. Here's the issue, though. I get he's doing that. Does another employee have a right to challenge this? Yeah, so here's the awkward point I had. So I have to approach the gentleman who's in a wheelchair and say, "You've got a real problem with disabled people, don't you?" I didn't say that. I said, you can't make offensive remarks about disabled people in the presence of others if it's unwelcome to them. Even if he thinks it's what? I'm just having a good time. I'm just making fun of my own life circumstance. And do you think that lands badly on him? He's being accused of disability discrimination when he's what? I'm the protected group, man. Is that difficult for people to hear? And you got to realize these rules cover you in this area. And remember, of course, there is no rule at Commerce City, no magic number of incidents. There's no three-strike rule. It depends on the severity or frequency of the underlying circumstances of the behavior. We don't hew to a rule. Can one time be severe enough to get people disciplined for their behavior? So let's go through this pretty quickly. What's not harassment, but still potentially a problem? These things can become harassing. For example, bullying is an incredible problem. I have no place for it in work. But do people get away with being aggressive at work? From time to time they do. It's not based on your sex, your religion. I'm just aggressive. I say crazy stuff because I've got an extroverted personality. So could that seem like I'm bullying people by making fun of a lot of people? Or by getting in their face and saying, "Man, how could you screw that up?" And can people take that negatively? They do, trust me. And so bullying is not illegal unless you're singling out protected groups. I'm not encouraging this behavior, by the way. In fact, I'm on an anti-bullying kick. And more importantly, as you'll see in a moment, can an employee use Commerce City's policy against harassment to call out bullying behavior? You're allowed to. I want to make that clear to you. Because how do I know you're not holding against people of my gender or religion? You're just mean to me. So can I use a harassment policy to call out a bully? You're allowed to do that here. So please remember that. Get you sideways with these rules pretty quickly. Which also goes to, of course, having a relationship between coworkers. If it's consensual, is not against the law, could be regulated, could look like favoritism. Insensitive remarks, petty slights, occasional flirting, those are often not severe or pervasive enough. But let's see how well you do with this. Since I saw you last. A female employee has just returned from maternity leave and throughout the day privately discusses breast milk for her baby. Hey, do employees have a lawful right to do that? Are you familiar with the law in this regard? We've talked about in the past here, that's a legal protection in Colorado and under federal law. Working mothers have the right to take time during the day to express breast milk for a newborn child, using breaks during the day to exercise this right. So she is protected in this regard. Male employees, I had this case, male employees sidle up to the room that she's using, and they do this. Got that? So the question for you is this. They're clearly joking. Could that insensitive behavior constitute workplace harassment? Okay, I know you know this stuff. It's kind of almost a final exam. Based on what protected status? Gender. Everybody get that? If you didn't get the memo, she just had a baby. Is that part and parcel of your gender experience? Therefore, is she protected based on her gender? And are they treating her differently based on the fact that she just had a baby? So does she immediately move to the head of the protection list under our rules because she's now, I'm being treated differently? I don't hear you mooing to the male employees. I don't hear you mooing to the male employees. You're singling out a female employee just had a baby for this behavior. Therefore, does she move ahead? Can she exercise a complaint of harassment based on gender? Anybody have a question? Anybody not get that? This is a true story, so I want to make sure you see how probably, you know what I like about this case? Do you think these guys had any concept that they're engaging in any type of offensive behavior? They're just messing with her, right? Do their intentions matter? They do not. So can she call them on it? She can. Now, they didn't get fired. I want to make that clear. But what do we tell these guys? You got to knock it off on the mooing. I got to tell you, if you have my wife and you did that, if I heard she had a baby, she'd probably put you down, just so you know. That's not a very good sense of humor for someone who is self-conscious about having just delivered a child. So they're playing with fire in this humor anyway, correct? Trust me, if you've been around somebody who had a baby, fire. I would not recommend this. So let's keep going. City's anti-harassment policy is really broad. In fact, no unlawful harassment is in any protected category. Sexual harassment is viewed uniquely. I'll talk about that in just a second. And can almost anything be offensive conduct? Written, nonverbals, touching people inappropriately. Can all those be offensive to a party? Of course. Most importantly, to whom should you go if you have a complaint? You can go to your supervisor of human resources. Can you bypass your own supervisor? You can, but you have to demonstrate some unwelcomeness to a member of your management. Can you go up your chain of command? You're allowed to do that. All your managers know that as well. And of course, most importantly is the bottom part of this, and that is no retaliation for having complained. I talked about this morning. It's really the live wire complaint. You can't hold it against people for having complained. Does everyone have a right to challenge the behavior of their coworkers? They do. We let the investigation process unfold. So let's talk about this then. You can't text what you can't say or do. Please keep that in mind. And there's generally no free speech rights to harass people. Can't text offensive content. That's where these personal cell phones have felled many an employee because they brought harassment to work using their cell phone. Is it still covered by these rules if you're doing it at work or engaging a coworker with offensive content? Yes. So let's keep moving along. You ready for these last few rules? You guys seem to get this stuff, so I'm not going to push you any harder than I have to. So let's see how well you know your own rules. Pam, an attractive female employee, likes to wear blouses with plunging necklines, short, tight skirts, and high heels. When she walks down the hall in her office, her male coworkers and some females often stare at her. One guy does this. I'm coming home. Feigning a heart attack because of her physical appearance. Pam has repeatedly indicated to her coworkers their conduct embarrasses her and asked them to stop it without success. Does Pam have a claim of unlawful harassment? What's that? Occasionally. That's actually awesome that he caught that. So what's the question here? Is she being treated differently? Probably so. Is she being treated differently based on her gender? She's female. She's getting stared at. There's no evidence here that men who are awesome as me are getting stared at. Or you. So is she being singled out for being stared at? Is there some evidence of differential treatment in the fact that she's a woman? So what's the ultimate question? I appreciate your insight. Is it severe or pervasive enough to alter the conditions of her job? Could it be? It could be. Here's why I put this up here. What's the one thing that Pam hasn't done to protect her? Hasn't changed her appearance. She doesn't have to, though. Remember your policy. Thank you. You have to demonstrate your unwelcomeness to the behavior. Now, how she demonstrated to her coworkers, she's done that. But is there an open question that she's let a member of her management know that this behavior is unwelcome? So in order for her to be protected under City of Commerce city policy, is she going to have to generate some type of complaint to a supervisor? Does that make sense to you? Now, I got to tell you, I loved your comment about her appearance. It's not her appearance that, remember, there's no assumption of risk. You don't invite harassment per se. What do you make of the appearance? What could we tell her? Very good. Do we have a policy about what people are supposed to wear? And is she out of compliance with it? This is inappropriate for our workplace because I think it's inviting more attention than we really want to bring to people's physical appearance. So if we had a rule, or could we construct a rule that says this isn't appropriate for our workplace, could we do so? We're allowed to do that, right? But that's no excuse for people staring at her if she doesn't like it. I use this example because I get a lot of these cases. It's hard to know for you to observe someone engaged in this behavior. Have you ever been stared at? It's very unsettling. I've never been stared at, so I don't know, but except by coyotes when I run, which is also unsettling. But I've never been stared at. But if you've been stared at, people report to me that it's very disconcerting to have people stare at you at work. So I take them at their word. It can be very unwelcome. Okay, very good that you got that. So you got to demonstrate your unwelcomeness, right? How do you do it here? You got to let your management know. A supervisor or HR. Can you complain about what was once welcome? Can it become unwelcome over time? You're allowed to do that. Relationships change. When I started, I thought that was Chuck. He said stupid things. It was okay. But now I've been here 5 years, and I'm done with it. This guy's constantly talking about my religion, constantly talking about where my people are from. He makes nuanced, offensive comments that I no longer appreciate. So can you change your dynamic over time? You're allowed to do that. You have to put people on notice, though. I no longer appreciate it, and I got to let my management know it's unwelcome, correct? Because what's the assumption if it's gone on for a number of years? It's okay. Which goes to the next view. Charles, the customer, frequently visits your workplace. During his visits, Charles often says offensive things to Cheryl, one of our employees. Cheryl goes to her boss. Remember your policy guidance? Cheryl goes to her boss to complain. Is she done right by City of Commerce City? Her boss refuses to address the behavior because this is a respected citizen. Does the city own this? It does. The rule here is, once we know about the behavior, do we have a duty to address it? How about this one? I had this happen, and I'm curious what you think about it. Waldo has often made comments to his administrative assistant, Esther, about how attractive she is. This is always an issue when you go to work with somebody. You're awesome. No, you look great. Really great. Creepy. Especially if you're in a relationship with somebody else. She never says anything when he makes these comments. Why? That's her boss. Very good. What I do is not rocket science. That's her boss. Do you do that a lot? Shut up! Probably not. So she never says anything. She suffers through it. One day, Esther requests a raise. Waldo says he'll consider a request and suggests they go out for drinks. Is this going down a slippery slope? That's a problem. What does that have to do with the pay raise? And then finally, Esther makes it clear she wants to keep the relationship professional, prefer not to go out with him. Good decision. Waldo says no problem. But what does he then do? Doesn't give her the raise, and when she says, why didn't I get the raise? I think I deserved it. Well, that's because you're not very cooperative. This is the stuff that soap operas are made of, but I have to tell you, is that supervisor potentially responsible for his conduct? That form of harassment has a name. It's called quid pro quo harassment. It's where the supervisor seems to make or suggest that sex or a relationship or a non-work relationship somehow is part of your job when it otherwise wouldn't be. And therefore, it's against the law. Does Commerce City own that behavior? They do. The one with the other one was a hostile work environment. That was a non-employee harassing one of our employees. I'm going to get this off my chest right now because I'm going to do justice to this class. Keep in mind, when non-employees come into this building and they engage in offensive conduct or behavior, do we have a responsibility to address it? We do. It's within our span of control as an organization. But there's people who are going to be on the streets out there. What's the rule there? The rule with regard to harassment out there, outside of a public building of the City of Commerce City, is our duty to address harassment is that which is reasonably within our control. So if this officer is out on the streets and someone is screaming from a street corner offensive content or speech, he can certainly address it as a criminal matter if they're overstepping the ordinances of the city, but otherwise, what is our reasonable ability to address this in terms of harassment? It may be limited. Maybe pulling you back. What's the problem there? This isn't going to be held against me, is it? The fact that I didn't do my job in this regard that day. So I can't hold it against you for complaining about the underlying conduct, but can I necessarily make a member of the public stop their free speech, even offensive speech, if it's within the bounds of the law? Probably not. You know that already from your interactions with the public. But please keep in mind, it's within our span of control. If they're in this building engaging in the same behavior, what can we tell them? You'll be leaving! And would that be acceptable? Does that make sense? So I want to make it very, very clear. I'm not trying to dismiss complaints. Do all employees have the right to complain of harassment coming at them from a citizen, from a third person? They do. Our duty to address it, though, is relegated to what is our level of control over the circumstance. I take all these complaints seriously, correct? But I got to tell you, there's people who work on crews out there. Have you seen this? You close down a lane. I've seen this all the time. You close down a lane to do some street work, and all of a sudden, people in the lane next to you roll down their window, cursing at you, doing all kinds of stuff like that, even when you're doing the city's business. That's certainly harassing, I got to tell you. But what's our measure of control of that? Very limited, correct? So please keep in mind. Now, I did, for parks people, I did have a case in which a citizen employee was mowing along the park path, and a citizen came out because the park path abutted their yard, and they came out and said, "You're mowing my yard. You're mowing my," they looked like a jungle in their backyard. "You're mowing my property, and I don't like it." And she climbed up onto a city vehicle and started to, get irate and get aggressive towards the city employee. Now, is that potentially a criminal offense that people are getting in an assaultive behavior towards you? Would that be appropriate to call and say, "Hey, I'm under attack here. Some crazy homeowner thinks I'm mowing their back property when I'm mowing our right-of-way on the path, and I need some help from law enforcement to get this person off my vehicle." Would that be appropriate? Yeah, absolutely. So, if people get hostile, we still use our protocols to address that. Okay. Next one, no retaliation you know about, right? Once you complain, you're protected. Even if it's not harassment, do you still have a right to complain? You do. Let's do the rest of these and finish our class. You work with Betty. Betty has a tendency to fly into a rage toward other employees and insult them. You know her personal life is miserable, but she's an incredible worker, which does not excuse bad behavior, yet it does in some organizations, I find. One day, you observe Betty turn to another female employee and call her a B word that rhymes with witch. And then when she raises objection, she says, if you can't take it, you can get the F out of this organization, which could be viewed as aggressive behavior, correct? So here's the question. Is that potential workplace harassment? Even though it's one instance. Yeah, very good. I'm not trying to get you crazy about this, but there's a rule here. The majority does not rule. It's what would be a reasonable circumstance for anybody working at the City of Commerce City. And are some words incendiary? So when you use the B word that rhymes with witch, other words like that, can they immediately strike at the heart of a severe and pervasive problem in an organization? So please remember this. The fact that you think the B word may be okay to use isn't the test. It's what would a reasonable person think is the appropriate standard in the workplace. That's my mom, who's super reasonable to a fault. So please remember this. The fact that everybody in the department does this isn't the case. It's the fact that it's offensive. Can I give an example of this? I had an entire case in which pretty rough and tumble workplace. Everybody was in a maintenance crew. And their way of showing love to each other was when you were walking in and out of the building or up and down stairs, they would give you an elbow to the side. So we'd be walking together, and it'd go like this, boom. And so every time people interacted with each other, they would you'd get assaulted as part of the job. It was almost like some creepy hazing ritual that everybody had. And a football drill was your everyday life experience. But amazingly enough, one employee, I love what I do for a living, one guy says, I'm done with this. I don't think I need to get elbowed every time I go to work. And so here's the question. Can that one man accuse these other men of harassing him successfully? Only men are getting elbowed, so they're being treated differently. Now, I know all men are getting elbowed, but no women are getting treated this way. But there are no women in the department. Irrelevant. Only men are getting singled out for this behavior. Is it aggressor behavior? And if one person finds it unwelcome, can they change the entire dynamic? So did one guy get everybody else a pass on getting elbows to the ribs? Does that make sense? So please remember that as we go through these. So a new person can set a new standard. Since I saw you last, I don't make it up. I just use these for learning aids, but these are probably poor decisions on the part of any manager. Manager constantly talks about his sexual prowess, which makes him what? Creepy. I mean, really? Don't you think that's not appropriate for a workplace? It begs for more scrutiny about your personal life than you probably really want anyway, but I think it's a problem to talk about your own sexual prowess among your coworkers unless you're actually actively engaging in sexual activities with them. How'd you think I did? You were good. Thank you. But I don't recommend that. And it's probably out of turn. So interesting enough, make lewd comments about female workers. And get this, I can't even reduplicate this. Whinnies like a horse whenever an attractive woman enters the workplace. I can only get this far. I cannot whinny. It's actually, I realized when I got this case, that this is behavior I could not reduplicate, thus allowing me to work a lot longer than this guy. So here's the question for you. It's a legal question. Can women who are not whinnied at bring a complaint of sexual harassment? Excellent. Very good. If you know that, you know a lot about harassment. I'll tell you why. Because bystanders have rights. The fact that it's happening at work and you observe it, can you challenge it? Is this offensive comments? In fact, I got to ask you. What do you make of the whinnying? I know. I will confess, I've been a man my entire life. I don't exactly get what he's driving at here. So can anybody venture a guess? What do you make of this guy whinnying at women? What's so bad about that? It's weird. What's so bad about it? Can anybody help me with this?
Well, it's like he's the stallion, the master.
Oh, you're awesome. Did you hear the comment? See, this was escaping me, so I asked these female employees, so what's the problem? I don't get it. What's so offensive about this? And you know what they said? He's putting himself in the role of some kind of stud horse, and that this is some type of sexual overture or come on, that he's basically saying through this animal language that he would like to satisfy them as the stud horse in the in this herd of horses. And so that's what they felt, that in a weird, twisted way, it was something of a sexual come-on. I appreciate that you deciphered that, because that's what the female coworkers say. You know what I like about that? Who gets to decide what's unwelcome? How it lands on whom? I don't think whinnying is anything other than weird and creepy. But could other people see an underlying sexual basis to this behavior? Who gets to drive that? The person who finds it to be an unwelcome experience, correct? Does that make sense? It's a great example of the problem of harassment. Even though, what do horseshoes, hand grenades, and harassment all have in common? Close counts. Thank you so much. Close enough is good enough to hurt people's feelings, and you got to know that. Which goes to, I told you the jerk to everybody. What's missing here? Jerk to everybody. You're not being treated differently, right? But look at the bottom bullet there. If the male employee can show that men get treated worse than women, does that give men a claim? Absolutely. We're looking for differential treatment. You know why I put this in here? Can one person's jerk be another person's harasser? Please remember that. Context is everything. It's how it lands on whom? The person undergoing the experience. You know, you realize this stuff has been litigated heavily, right? Context is everything. I always hearken back to the words of Justice Roberts. He's the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. He really gave us some insights into this in a case now involving Tyson Foods a number of years ago, in which he said the circumstance was a white supervisor was ridiculing two black employees at a Tyson's plant in Georgia by calling them boy, B-O-Y, B-O-Y. And the employees alleged, among a variety of claims, that they were being mistreated on the basis of their race. And you know what the employer's defense was? It's clever. The employer's defense was, use of the word boy in and of itself does not generate any racial bias. It's a descriptor of a young man of a certain age. And therefore, there's no racial bias associated with that term. You know what Justice Roberts said? It's the biggest bunch of BS he didn't say that, but that's the biggest bunch of BS I've ever heard. Do words have meaning in context? Could that dredge up racial inequity over hundreds of years in this country when persons who are white identify persons who are black by the descriptor, grown men by the descriptor boy? So could a black male take offense to being called boy, where if you called me boy, like if I was from Texas, my favorite state, from Texas, and you called me boy, it might have a different context. Maybe so. Does that make sense? So who gets to decide what's unwelcome? You, in the context of how the terms are being used about you. Whinnying for me is weird, but could a woman take sexual offense by being whinnied at? Does that follow? You got to know the meaning of the terms that you're using and how they land on the people around you. And that does take an adult to decipher that from time to time. And then finally, I had this happen. I'm curious what you think about it because it's the beginning of the end of our class. William keeps a Bible on his desk at work and always wears a large silver cross around his neck. Sometimes William uses biblical quotes to support his assertions in conversations with coworkers. Additionally, he tells people to have a blessed day. His coworker, Joe, starts calling him Saint Willie, making fun of the fact he's very religious and mocking the fact that he is a religious person. So he calls Willie Saint Willie. William confronts Joe and says, that's not polite to call me Saint Willie, and I take offense. So the question for you, assuming William brings this to his management, does he have a claim of harassment? Very good. That would be a form of what? Religious harassment. Mocking the fact that somebody is very religious is a form of religious harassment. Saint Willie, can that be an unwelcome experience? Now, you know why I appreciate that? Now, I want to make sure we close our class effectively with some advice here. Could other employees have a claim as well? Against whom? William. Could William's behavior also be viewed as unwelcome religious harassment to the people around him? In particular, what behaviors? The Bible quotes and have a blessed day could look like you're invoking prayer towards your coworkers. And could they, not that it offends me, but could they be offended by that? So could coworkers challenge William? So what do you make of this? What do we have to tell these guys? Maybe we keep all the religion toned down in the organization. No Saint Willie, no Bible quotes, no blessed day if they're an unwelcome experience. And of course, if you know how this works in my world, if Joe feels as though he's being challenged, what complaint is he going to raise about William? I'm just tired of hearing the religious stuff in the workplace. That's why I was pushing back. So is there going to be what's going to be the result? What's the equality that's going to come out of this case? Everybody get to your neutral corner and let's keep the religion to a minimum unless it's part of our job, which it rarely is in most organizations. Make sense? Okay, keep that in mind. Everybody's got a complaint in this behavior. Which goes to the closing. The fact you mean no harm is irrelevant. We started with it and I want to end with it. Can anybody find you offensive? Literally. Could someone be offended by you? So it takes a dose of humility to go to harassment class because anybody can challenge your behavior at any given time. Please know that. So what do we tend to do about it? We try to manage our behavior. I think the three greatest threats to the workplace are these behaviors. I wanted you to hear them a little bit. The first one is what I call Fight Club. It's a reference to a Brad Pitt film. Ever see it? I already broke the rule of Fight Club because yeah, thank you. You've seen the movie. But if you know someone who engages in overt aggressive behavior, can they be accused of harassment towards another human being? So please, try to keep that to a minimum. That behavior, while it might have had its time in the workplace, is no longer truly a welcome experience for most people. Secondarily, Brett Favre, NFL football hero, was made famous at the end of his career by sending an unwanted text message, a picture text, to Jen Sugar. You probably don't remember this case unless you're a super football fan like I am. There's a picture of his junk. I'll never forget it. I didn't see the picture, thank God. But when you send a picture of your junk to your coworker, do you think they might raise an objection? You can't text what you can't say or do, even jokingly. Problem? Which goes to the third one, the ponytail rule. I had a case in which a male employee kept on pulling a woman's ponytail. Does that constitute differential treatment in the workplace to pull a woman's ponytail? Yeah, even though men have ponytails, he never pulled a man's ponytail. He only pulled her ponytail because he liked to jerk her around. Secondarily, how many tugs of the ponytail does it take before it becomes workplace harassment? Could this be relatively intimate contact that you have the right to not have your face touched, your hair touched, and therefore could you view it as being severe and pervasive misconduct? So even though he's joking with her, the more physical the contact, the more likely it is to overstep these bounds, correct? Hands to yourself. Fourth one down, getting your freak on, your freaky freak, your freaky deek, the person who is weird. You know this person. Every workplace has a number of them. People who are provocative in their speech. People who like to push other people's buttons because they have profound views and they like to share them with others. I have no problem with people having provocative views as long as they keep them where? Often to themselves or outside of the work environment. Please remember that's a common concern. Weird fantasy talk. I've seen every iteration of this. I could spend a whole class talking about it. I'm writing a book in this regard. You know, I had a dream about you. Does that creep you out? It does, doesn't it? Me too. Can that really make someone feel like you're intruding into somebody's private life relatively quickly? And so the more you're freaky, the more you're going to unsettle people and probably violate these rules because you tend to be doing it only with a few people, correct? So don't necessarily do that. And then finally, people who have no understanding that, is everybody protected under these rules? Is everybody protected? So do you all have the button that I can push that lights you up? Could I probably, if I learned enough about you, find that thing that really gets you upset? Make fun of your wife? Make fun of your kids? Make fun of your kid that has a disability? Do you think that would rile you up pretty quickly at work? So what you got to know is this. Everybody's got that push button issue, right? And the goal is to avoid it. To not poke it like a bear at work. And let you be you and be sensitive enough to know that the more you probe into that stuff, are you going to have a problem? So please remember that. I'm not trying to sell you political correctness. I'm trying to sell you appreciation of your coworkers and wanting to do them no harm. I decry political correctness. It's impossible to achieve and it wrecks stuff. But wanting to be respectful to people, is that always welcome in workplaces? Okay. And that's it. I just have some advice for you. If you turn the phone down, I think you'd be viewed as more respectful. If you apologize to people when you offend them, I think they'll give you a second chance. And most importantly, if you're polite to people, do they ever accuse you of harassment? Rarely. And then finally, if you could exercise a bit of restraint, especially with the more provocative views that you hold, you probably have a much more longer and fruitful career than the people who have not learned that as well as others. Those are not unreasonable expectations for most people who go to work every day in this country. You good? Questions? How can people do the acknowledgement that they attended the class, that piece of paper? Should they just put it in the back counter there? Would you please, if you wouldn't mind, just on the way out that way, Linda doesn't have to come around and collect them. Hey, any questions for me? I only get to see every few years, so I'm going to make sure I do justice to this issue, which is incredibly important. And while I certainly joke my way through it from time to time, I want to make sure you got something out of it. Learn enough about the law? Are you all protected? Do you have the right to be left alone on at certain times in your life at work? All right, you good? Thank you for what you do. The city looks great. Things are booming around here. So I appreciate all that you're doing for us. So thank you guys.